So, welcome to Financial and Academic Planning for College. I'm Dr. P. Igor will introduce himself in just one moment. I am a former high school teacher turned full-time test prep tutor and college consultant. And a lot of times people will ask, why did you name your company Crimson Coaching? Well, my undergraduate degree is from Harvard. I lived in the place with the little red crimson dome up there on top called Dunster House. And what I do is I coach students to give their all and to reach their academic potential. So the name Crimson Coaching. But I was a high school teacher in starting out in New York in places like Great Neck North High School. And then I ended up my career at Scarsdale High School in Westchester County. In between, the longest I was at Horace Mann School, which is an independent day school in Riverdale. But I spent the biggest bulk of my career as a private teacher as the head of and head coach of Crimson Coaching, where I've helped students sort of get into schools like Princeton and Stanford, as well as my alma mater, as well as, other schools like St. Joe's College in Philadelphia, where one of my students got a full scholarship there. So why Igor and I developed this event is because, as we were sort of just discussing, if you plan, right, both on the financial side and the academic side, well before your student or child is going to college, you're sort of in the best position to get them into the college they would really like to go to, as well as for you being able to afford it. So just a little note on how this presentation will run. We're going to aim to talk for about 45 minutes, and we will have a Q&A at the end. But in the meantime, please feel free to put any questions you have into the chat, and we'll try to answer them throughout as well as at the end if we miss any. So Igor.
Hi, I'm Igor.Tsukerman. I am a co-founder and CEO and chief investment officer of a company called Eureka Wealth Solutions, which is a small, I would say, boutique company. We're based in New York. We specialize in investment management as well as financial planning. I'll talk a little bit more about the company down the road. As you can see, went to Cornell. I also have a master's in financial engineering. I actually spent first, I would say, 15 years of my career on Wall Street. You can probably see some of the recognizable names out there. After the financial crisis, a couple of years after that, I was actually there at Merrill Lynch and Bank of America, right in the middle of it. I think this was the breaking point where I've had enough. And I branched out, and I've been independent for the past 10 years. I actually really enjoy doing the investment management part of it, but I also enjoy doing the financial planning. I enjoy the part where I can help people. And just a quick note on financial planning, I think it's one of the most misunderstood concepts generally in America today. Most people have a pretty good idea of the money flow in and out, of their income and expenses. But when it comes to planning, it's a whole different story. And I can tell you that top 3 things that people need to plan for and save for is retirement, college education for kids, and buying a property. And those last 2 are not always in the same order. And it always amazes me that even we have probably half the clients from Wall Street, and a lot of them have no idea exactly how to go about it. And this is why I'm running the company. This is how I enjoy helping clients, and this is why I'm doing this webinar today.
Great, thank you. So I thought I would start off just by mentioning things that students should do early and parents help them, and things that you should do for all 4 years. And the latter part of my talk will be sort of breaking down what to do in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. So one thing that I've noticed really since I started Crimson Coaching back in 2014, but I think perhaps even earlier, even when I began teaching at Horace Mann in 2007, is that students are really reading very little on their own. And why that hurts them is that when they then get to an exam like the SAT or the ACT, where they need to be able to identify the main idea in a piece of writing, they're really unable to do that. I mean, part of this, I think, is definitely because of the phone and the internet. It sort of chops up our attention, and we won't go into the why. But I think the more you can get your children to read quality nonfiction and identify the main idea, that would be very helpful to them. And if you want to know what sort of quality nonfiction is, especially in terms of the SAT, you can go to my website on the resources page. I actually have a little button where they can read quality nonfiction in the sciences, social sciences, and other types of reading that they might encounter on the SAT or ACT. I also recommend students keep an extracurricular journal. Believe it or not, when they apply to college on the Common App, they will need to write out not only how many weeks per year, but also how many hours per week they spent in each of 10 activities. They have 10 slots. And it's often really difficult for students to remember this in 12th grade, what they did in 9th grade. So I would say it's not something they need to do daily, but perhaps monthly. They can just kind of jot down what they did each week. It's also a great idea for parents to bring children to the variety of campuses that exist, at least in our New York metro area, but also I think really anywhere in the Northeast. I know Winnie's outside of Philadelphia, just to get a real idea of what's the difference, for example, of walking onto a small liberal arts private college like Sarah Lawrence College in Bronxville, for example, versus a large urban campus like NYU. I'm not saying that your student will apply to Sarah Lawrence or NYU, but if they decide then that they want to go to California for college when they're in 11th or 12th grade, they'll know then that they shouldn't be applying to both Chapman and UCLA because they'll have a very different kind of experience at both of those schools. I also really encourage students to meet with teachers regularly, not just in subjects where they're having difficulty for extra help, but in order to learn how to cultivate a relationship with an adult. This will really pay off, not just when they're in college, of course, when going to office hours can help them identify a mentor, but also when they need to be at the end of 11th grade, and I'll speak about that in a bit, when they need to ask an adult for a letter of recommendation for college. A teacher who knows that child outside of class will be able to give a much better recommendation when they know them outside of that 45-minute class. The last tip is sort of choose friends widely. There are so many studies, and none of your children are probably in this category, for example, but, students whose friends smoke pot are much more likely to begin to smoke marijuana, right? And it's just because adolescent development is such that the friend group begins to take on a much bigger role in students' decisions than when they're in elementary school. So choosing friends wisely will often have a surprising impact on what your child decides to do later on down the road. So in 9th grade, what are some things that 9th graders can do? 9th grade is a big transition for most students between middle and high school. And so one of the best things that they can do is try to establish good study skills, even if their grades aren't quite where you'd like them to be. If they master how to manage their time, how to take notes, how to study in a systematic way prior to a test, they will be in a much better place to start getting better grades in 10th grade. Of course, if they're able to get good grades in 9th grade, that's really one way that they can stand out from their peers. Because most college admissions counselors know that the transition between 8th and 9th grade is very tough for many students, they're willing to often give them a pass on weaker 9th grade grades. But if your child can get really great grades from 9th grade, that's one way they can stand out. I also encourage students that if you want to try a new extracurricular activity, try it out in 9th grade. This is really the time to explore. I once had a student who had done competitive gymnastics from 5 years old up through 10th grade. And then she wanted to start crew in 11th grade. And it's not a bad thing to start a new extracurricular in 11th grade, but she's just not going to have time before she graduates or really before she applies to college to show mastery in that new activity. So really, as you get down the road, you want to think about getting better and better at a specific activity or interest or academics. And so try to start that as early as possible. By 10th grade, this is really where you want to start to go deep. In 10th grade, if your child's grades were uneven in 9th grade, this is really the time that they need to, it's sort of make or break. They need to start getting that GPA up. And if you didn't have a tutor in 9th grade, you want to think about it in 10th grade if by the first quarter their grades are still uneven. You don't necessarily need to hire someone like me. You could get, oftentimes National Honor Society, other students, good students will tutor students who are struggling. You can look at that. And in the extracurricular domain, students should begin to start narrowing their focus on one or two activities. In contrast to when I applied to college back in 1988, when you wanted to be well-rounded. I was just telling this to a classmate from Harvard. Now the emphasis is on being well lopsided. So it's not that you want to do just one thing, but you want to get really good in that one thing. Oftentimes, what you can do especially to show initiative, and I was recommending this to my former classmate because she relocated from abroad to Long Island, and now her children haven't done any activities, and they're already midway through 10th grade. I told her to consider an impact project, which I'm happy to share a link to a YouTube video I have on these. But this is an independently led project where students strive to make some sort of impact outside of clubs offered in their school. This can often show great initiative and leadership, which is something that colleges are looking for. In the subject that students were particularly good at in 9th grade, you might also want to signing them up for their first AP course, or if your school is an IB school, getting them into the IB program. And most importantly, if your child took Algebra 2 in 10th grade, definitely consider them prepping for the ACT or the SAT in the summer between 10th and 11th grade. Again, I know for most of us who went to college in the 80s or 90s, it was very common for students to take the SAT for the first time in March of the 11th grade and in May of the 11th grade. The problem with this is that students are also prepping for AP exams at that time. And you really want to put more of your focus on the AP exam because that's a better indicator of what students have been doing all year long. So try to take a little bit of that load off by having them take the late August or early October SAT in 11th grade. And if they don't do well, there's always the November and December tests. The other difference between the 80s and 90s and today is that the SAT wasn't an all year round proposition back in the 80s and 90s like it is today. So students have a lot more options. So the only thing that they really need is having that Algebra 2 in 10th grade in order to begin that process. So Igor, back to you.
All right, so switching gears, let's talk about college costs. So we'll start with just looking at what you're going to be up against. So first of all, what's included in college costs? Tuition fees and room and board, assuming that your child is going to be on campus. Those fees are actually relatively easy to track, and on the right side you can see the official government report of what it looks like and what it historically looked like in terms of in terms of those numbers for public, which is the public 4-year, which is the top curve. Of course, that's not where the college costs end. Things like books and supplies and transportation. This is something that your child will have to incur as well. But those are more individual, harder to track, at least on an overall national level, and different savings vehicles that exist for college that I will talk about in a few minutes look at those differently. But obviously keep in mind, those are still your costs. And the biggest takeaway from this slide is that over the past 30 years, the costs of college have increased faster than inflation. So if you think inflation is high now, it's historically been about 2.6%, and the college costs have increased about 6% a year. So with high inflation now, the expectation is that the cost of college will also increase faster over the last couple of years, and it will still outpace inflation in the future. Right. So how do you begin to pay for college? Well, we'll start with the sort of easy part, the financial aid. For full disclaimer, financial aid is a whole different area in the planning for college, and there are lots of people who specialize in financial aid. We don't. We specialize in the savings portion, but we obviously encourage people to look at financial aid first. You will probably recognize a lot of these financial aid types. So let's start with the top. If you just so just a quick review. So scholarships, those are merit-based and obviously require no repayment. They vary in sizes and shapes all over, and again, there are services that specialize in scholarships specifically. We actually work with another company that only does scholarships. If you're interested, let me know afterwards. I can hook you up with them. Moving on, grants, again, no repayment, but those are need-based, and typically these are federal, state, and sometimes college-level grants. So again, when you have no repayment and you're able to apply and receive those are no-brainers. Going on to the next level, work study. So this is typically a program where students would work part-time, usually on campus, and obviously get paid for it, and that's part of financial aid. Usually a good idea if you can get that as well. And then the last level of financial aid is loans. And loans also vary in sizes and types, can be taken by students, can be taken by parents, but one thing for sure, they need to be repaid, although as you probably know, there have been a lot of developments on student loans lately. I'll talk about that on the next slide, but just look at the graph on the right. This is the typical pie. This is typically, this is the average of how people pay for colleges. 26% is scholarships and grants, 18% is some types of loans. 2% is even relative of friends, if you have nice relatives and friends who can loan you money. But more than half is from income and savings. Keep that in mind. So moving on to the next slide, very quick overview of FAFSA. This is probably something you've heard about. This is the uniform application on the federal level. It's an annual process where you have to fill this out to see if you're eligible to receive any need-based scholarship, any need-based grants, or any other form of financial aid. So you have some of the details here. You need to be aware that there is 3 different deadlines for FAFSA. There's one that's federal, which is actually very late. It's almost at the end of the school year you're applying for. But unfortunately, there are other deadlines. Each college imposes their own deadline, and each state imposes their own deadline, and you want to check those. Generally, it's a good idea if you think you may qualify to fill out this form as soon as possible, as soon as it becomes available. So, for example, for the next school year, it's already available. It starts at the fall of the year before you apply to. Moving on. So another slide. This one deals specifically with how do you borrow. This is probably something you hear less about. There are different types of loans. The best one is the direct subsidized loan. Subsidized means that once you get it, it's only for students, it's only for undergraduate. But once you get it, you do not have to repay anything until 6 months after your graduation. And when you do start repaying it, it will adjust based on the interest rate at that point, and it will be adjusting annually. This is the most common one, and this is the most preferential one for students. And again, it's need-based. There are also direct unsubsidized loans. They're not based on financial need. Unsubsidized mean just like any other loan, the interest starts going as soon as you take it out. So those are a financial decision whether or not you actually want to take those. Those again are student loans. There is an additional plus loans, which are for parents or for graduate students, and they're potentially larger loans, but again, they're more like regular loans where you have to repay them starting, and the interest starts right away. And then there's also consolidation loans. This is typically if you have multiple different loans throughout the college years and you want to consolidate them. There's usually a possibility to consolidate them, again, with some benefits to you. And as you can see, those were the interest rates. They jump around with the Federal Reserve interest rate. And in case you don't know, those rates have gone up quite a bit this year. So be prepared for that. Sorry, let's move on to the next slide.
Great. And that's such great information, Igor. I'm just going to ask while I'm speaking, do you mind just muting yourself? I think that'll change who is appearing on the thumbnail video. Yeah, it should. Oh, no, it's not. Oh, interesting. It says show active speaker. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, okay. So in 11th grade, after your child has hopefully gotten their grades under control, begun to sort of identify what are their extracurricular passions, 11th grade, we often hear, is the most important grade of high school. And it really is, because by this time, students should be able to demonstrate both mastery and what their passions are. You know, the 2 biggest sort of qualities that are assessed by college admissions officers are the types of courses that your child takes and how they did in those courses. So in essence, what were their courses rigorous and how well did they do in those courses? And if you'd like more about this, and I should say, these are two really excellent books I'll put into the chat later while Igor's speaking. Jeff Salingo's Who Gets In and Why, A Year Inside College Admissions, can give you much more details about this. But if there are AP courses offered, your child should be taking them. Hopefully, they're in subjects that your child enjoys, so that if they hate physics, don't have them take AP physics because they'll be miserable. But if they love history, definitely have them take, for example, AP US history. You also want to have them finish the SAT, ACT. Again, if they took Algebra 2 in 10th grade, have them finish that by December. If they're not accelerated, meaning if they are in Algebra 2 as a junior, of course, it's okay if they take it in March and May, but you really just want to be mindful of the fact that most likely, if they are in AP courses, their attention is going to need to be bifurcated. And so probably starting to study for the SAT and ACT or ACT earlier so that they're not cramming for both the AP and the SAT at the same time would probably be a better option for your child. I think it's a really good idea for students to start building a college list in the fall. And I have some talks coming up, free talks offered by libraries, one of which is how to build a college list. I also have a pre-recorded version on YouTube that you could check out at youtube.com/Crimson Coaching. But this can start really after you've done your 9th and 10th grade general visits. And let's say your child has decided, I want to go to a small liberal arts school near a city, right? Well, then they can start building their list so that they have 3 reach schools, 5 target schools, and 4 likely schools in the fall. And if they're out of state, they can, of course, take an online tour, which the online tours have become so much better since COVID. Then, that they might start with like a list of 30, say, and they're going to be whittling down. And part of that whittling down process is hopefully over February and maybe April break, you can visit safety and target colleges. I also have another talk called Making the Most Out of Your College Tours. And it's a really good idea for you to try to visit colleges while they're in session. If you can only go during the summer, it's better than not going at all. But best is if you can go while there are actual students there, so your child can get the sense of, oh, this is what it would really feel like to go to this college. And then also in 11th grade, you want your child to cultivate relationships with at least 2 academic teachers and their guidance counselor. I used to teach AP US history, and so that's generally offered in the junior year. And I used to have a ton of students come to me asking me for recommendations, which I was happy to do, but it was always easier for me to write recommendations for students who had either participated a lot in class, or if they were shy, would come to see me before school on a free period after school, so that I could add an anecdote that would make that letter a lot richer and really come alive for the admissions officer who is reading it on the receiving end. Teachers are so busy. They're not going to reach out to your kid. Your kid needs to reach out to the teacher. I will say it is possible that some teachers may rebuff these efforts. Some teachers maybe should have retired a long time ago. Some teachers just want to get their grading done in school. But I would say the vast majority of teachers get into teaching because they love students. And I know because I now work with students one-on-one, and that's what I really love. But when I was in the classroom, I realized, it's really hard to get to know students when you have 25 other students there. So your child really needs to make that effort for their teachers to get to know them outside the classroom. The reason for this, again, is those teacher recommendations. If your child is a little hesitant about going, they can bring a friend. I used to have kids come to me in groups of 2 and 3, and that we would usually have a lot of fun. And, they might even learn something during that process. If they're not big class participators, they might want to also show their passion for a particular subject through the classwork itself. I used to give a research paper, and I could always tell the students who went above and beyond for their research paper, or the students who were just kind of going through the motions. So I could also write about that for the shyer students. When you get to the end of the school year in 11th grade, I recommend having your child ask 2 academic teachers, unless they're going to art school, in which case you definitely want to, or music school, you definitely want to have them ask an art or music teacher. But if they're going to a liberal arts or a technical college, you want to have them ask one of the 5 main subjects. Will you write me a strong letter? Now, 99 times out of 100, students ask, will you write me a letter? I am a person who doesn't shy away from bad news. It's not that I like to deliver it, but I did have one student in the hundreds of letters that I wrote who I couldn't write that student a good letter. And I said to the student, do you have anybody else that you could ask? Because I'm not sure mine would be the strongest letter. And they went ahead and did that. Some teachers may feel uncomfortable with having that conversation. So if you just ask, will you write me a letter? That teacher may write you a letter, but it might be a mediocre letter, which is not what you want. So I would rather know that teachers would not write me a strong letter and have the opportunity to look for another teacher who does have a really something positive to say about me. So make sure that your child asks, will you write me a strong letter before they leave to ask. And you want to ask before the end of school, because lots of teachers will write these over the summer. Teachers do not get paid for the extra work that it takes to write these. And some teachers are writing upwards of 25 or 50 letters a year. That's an enormous burden for teachers. So sometimes schools cap the amount of letters that individual junior teachers can write. So you want your child to get in before their quota is filled. Finally, in 12th grade, you really want to start that application process early and stay organized. I recommend having your college list finalized by July, in between 11th and 12th grade, and then starting your Common App personal statement over the summer. The reason why is now you can, you don't want to start early because there's too much in 11th grade that needs to get done. You need to finish your SATs. You need to do well on your APs. In June, maybe the first half of July, you want to decompress. And then in 12th grade, when nothing else is occupying your intellectual bandwidth, that's when you really want to start your Common App personal statement, which is a 650-word essay. I say if parents have a limited amount of funds to dedicate to the college prep process, I recommend putting it towards an essay coach versus an SAT coach. And I do both in my business. I prep kids for the SAT, and I also help kids with college essays. I feel that there are enough free resources or low cost resources. Like, for instance, I run a very small SAT prep class that is, a fraction of what I charge for personal, one-on-one lessons. Your child could get prepped in that way. But essay writing is such a personalized process that, and most students are completely flummoxed with the type of writing that the Common App asks them to do because they've never been asked to do this in all of high school. As an AP US history teacher, I used to teach students how to write an analytical essay, but I never asked them to write about their own lives. And I recommend the essay coach because, those essays often pay off in big ways when it comes to the merit-based scholarships that Igor was talking about. Again, a student came to me about 7 years ago. The family spent $2,000 on a package of essay coaching, and the student got a full ride to St. Joe's, which was worth at that time $240,000. So for a $2,000 investment, the return on investment was $240,000. I'm not Igor, but even I say that's pretty good ROI, right? So I do think an essay coach makes sense. In the fall, hopefully their list is already set. Now they need to write the smaller supplemental essays and begin to revise that personal statement for colleges that are perhaps not on the Common App. So, for example, University of Texas, University of California system, those are all completely different essay questions. They also want to get time to get those letters in from those teachers who maybe aren't great at time management. And then finally, give your counselor time to read everything so that hopefully everything can be handed in by November 1st when the application for early decision and early action are. And there's just something in the chat. So I am just gonna quickly go through these other couple of slides. 12th grade, I think that the biggest thing for students to remember, actually, I should put this on the all 4 years slides, is watch what you post on social media. College admissions officers, do check your child out on social media. And there have been instances, I know at least at my alma mater, where Harvard rescinded an offer of admission to a student after something that they posted on social media. Igor, back to you.
All right, so switching gears again, assuming we're done with financial aid, how do we actually save for college? So let's take a look at these 2 charts, and they should be eye-opening. They were to me when the first time I did the research and found them. So the left chart is how America saves for college, and you can see all kinds of savings vehicles, savings account, checking account, regular investment account. The truth is only the bottom 3, 529 plan, Coverdale, and prepaid state plan are specialized and give you some sort of benefits to save for college. The other 60% are not, and that's still how majority of people try to save for college. And if you look at the chart on the right, this is what's actually being used for college. 529 plan is leading, which is great, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But the second one is potential retirement savings. Please, I implore you, do not do that. This is what a lot of people do, and taking money out of your retirement savings to pay for your child's education sounds noble, but this is, from financial perspective, probably the worst thing you can do. Not to mention that you're reducing your retirement savings, you're actually paying taxes and penalties. And that is just a sign of poor financial planning. And this is why I have a job, so you can avoid that. Okay, so move on to what do you actually need to consider for college savings? Well, if we click on the list on the left, benefits and the disadvantages that you need to look at include all of those different things. Federal income tax treatment, any contributions, growth, and distributions from any plan that you're looking at, you need to know what those are. State income tax treatment, that's a really hairy one because every state has its own rules on everything. It's amazing how different they could be. Federal income gift tax treatment. This is something also you need to know, that a number of contributions to different plans may fall under the gift tax treatment, which currently is starting this year $17,000 per person from anybody who's giving a gift, or 34,000 from a parent, from two parents. So some of them, if you exceed that number, you may get tax on. Estate tax, which most people don't even think about, but there are some implications. All the other things, maximum investments, whether it's annual or overall, some are generous, some are very strict. Ability to change beneficiary. Again, if you have more than one student and you may want to change the beneficiary, it could be very advantageous, and a plan that doesn't allow it is a problem. All kinds of restrictions on time, age, and your income. Also, you should consider how financial aid would treat any one of those savings plans that will be on the right side in a second. What types of investment choices going there? What expenses qualify for you to actually get any benefits from? And of course, what do you do with non-qualifying expenses? So it's a lot to think about. And these are just, if you click on that, the next list on the right, these are some of the plans that are available that have some combination of these benefits on the left, and some are work for some people and some are better for other people, again, depending on all these different types of benefits. To be sure, we actually have a whole matrix that basically has, the left as the columns and the right as the rows, and we know which ones are better for who. But unless you actually do the exercise, it might be a very time-consuming task. So moving forward, 529 plan. We consider this to be universally one of the better vehicles, and so does most of America. Again, there are some exceptions, and this is not the only way you can do this, but 529 plan checks most of the boxes. So it allows your investments to grow on a tax-deferred basis, and the distributions are tax-free as long as you use them for college expenses. So if you're familiar with something like an IRA, for example, this is somewhat similar in that sense that you can contribute money to it. You cannot deduct it from your federal taxes, but some states allow you to deduct some portions of the contribution from your state taxes, which is also useful. You must use the funds for education. These are all the different types of things that you can use it for. It's recently been allowed to also use for K-12 tuition. Unfortunately, it depends on the state. Most of you who are in New York State, unfortunately, you can't do this because the state of New York almost immediately disallowed that. But in some states, you actually can. It also allows you high contribution limits, which, in some states goes up to over $500,000. It's also favorable financial aid treatment, meaning it's looked at as student benefit, not as a parent benefit. State tax benefits that I already covered, and a few other things. So the one possible negative is that it does not allow you self-direct investments, meaning the choices are somewhat limited. and it might be a good idea to have a financial professional to help you with that. One last thing I wanted to mention on that is that a very recently passed law, literally last Christmas, allows you to roll over anything left over in your 529 plan into a student's IRA rather than taking money out and paying taxes and penalties. So if you're worried about over contributing to it, worry not. You can still find good use for that money afterwards. Moving on to the next slide. So just a few words about my company. So we're a fee-only fiduciary advisor, which means we put your interest first. We do not sell anything commission-based, no insurance products, no trade commissions, none of that. As I mentioned, we specialize in financial planning and on the investing side in thematic and impact investing, which I can do a separate webinar on. So I'm not going to go too much into that, but I'm happy to answer questions on this. Generally, we start with your goals and your values, and that's our approach. And so moving on, one of the things that may go with your values, we donate 2% of the fees you pay to us to a charity of your choice, which I don't know another financial advisor who does that. We are completely personalized. We treat you as a separate case. We do not have any two financial plans or any two portfolios that are the same, and there is no reason for it because everybody's different. And we focus on retirement and college planning. You can actually see on the right side a screenshot of one of our financial plans where we assess everything that's going on in your life financially and your goals. We'll look at your main goals. We set them up, and then college planning is one of them. And we see how different potential scenarios may affect your life, your cash flows today, and your retirement, and your other goals. And as part of it, we also help you set up and manage 529 plans. Dr. P.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we're just wrapping up, and before we end, I'll just mention that I have a little college planning checklist. You could feel free to email me to get that. It's my version of a handout. You can also learn more about lots of the things like college tours and making a college list on Crimson Coaching's YouTube. And if you found this interesting, helpful, I give lots of webinars about once a week, usually at night, for different libraries around the tri-state area. They always let people sign up for free when they're online. Some of them will be in person, though, starting this spring. And I also have a new version of my SAT prep starting February 26th. There's a little early bird discount if you register by February 9th. So that might be helpful to those of you who maybe have 10th or 11th graders out there. And I just want to, thank you all for coming. I know sometimes people need to drop off the call because you only have an hour for lunch, but we did want to try to answer some questions. I did answer some privately in the chat, but if there's others that you think, might be relevant to everybody, feel free to either unmute yourself, or if you feel more comfortable, you could put that into the chat.
And I also just wanted to add, so you can see Dr. P's and my information in there. You can feel free to call me or email me or visit our website to read more about our process and how we do things. I also wanted to offer all of you 1 month of free service, which in my industry is not offered because there's so much work that goes up front. But for attending today's webinar, if you mention Dr. P's webinar, we will give you the first month for free.
Oh, that's so kind, Igor. Yes, I don't do 1 month for free, but I do free half-hour consultations. So if you feel like you have a question about, an academic related question regarding your child, I'm also happy to meet with you for a half hour, and see if I can't help you.
Yeah, obviously, first conversation with me up to an hour is free as well. If it's not for everybody, we need to figure out if we can work with each other. So again, that's besides the one month free.
Great. I will actually make one question that came to me privately in the chat. I'll talk about that generally, about whether it's better to get A's in regular level courses or B's in AP level courses. In general, colleges will look more kindly on B's and APs because they see that the student is trying to challenge themselves. There's a limit, though. If that child's grades start to drop down into the C level range, that's when it's not going to help them. And I also, as just a teacher, know that the amount of time that that course is probably taking is going to start sucking time away from other courses. And you probably, if they're down in the C level for an AP class, you probably want to go into a regular level class. There was another question that came into the chat that's more directed, that's probably, I think, better for Igor. I don't know if you can see it, Igor, if okay.
I don't think so. No, I don't
Okay.
see any
So I'll just
question.
read it out loud. Any advice on how to adjust your savings portfolio to maximize the benefit from a FAFSA perspective?
I'm sorry, which portfolio?
Savings
Oh, savings portfolio.
to maximize benefit from FAFSA.
Right. So FAFSA will look at all the parents' assets. Some of the accounts will have preferential treatment, like I mentioned, 529 plan, for example, even though it's in the parent's name, but it's for a beneficiary, and it will be looked at as student savings and student income rather than parents. Also, keep in mind that FAFSA typically looks at 2 years back. So for the next year, for the 23-24 year, they will look at the 2021 statements and 2021 taxes. So I'm not sure if there's something you can do specifically to plan for the year that you're applying to try to minimize your taxes on that year, but generally keep that in mind. In terms of the accounts, again, you can't really hide any accounts. If you're talking about savings account, you'll have to show it, and that's going to be counted. General advice again is look at some of those advantageous plans that I mentioned. Some of them have very specific benefits that may or may not be useful for you, but typically those are all better than just savings account or regular brokerage account, either from the point of view of taxes or from the financial aid perspective. There's definitely some benefits. Hopefully that helps.
Great. Thanks, Igor. There's another question. Igor mentioned that 529 plans can help in terms of favorable financial aid treatment. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I believe I just answered that. So it's from the point of view of the federal financial aid as well as state and college. This will be looked at as student resources, not parents. And as you probably know, the onus is always on parents to pay for students. So that will reduce your bill.
Okay, great. I'm sorry I didn't get that. I'm also monitoring our Facebook Live chat there. Any other questions, comments? There's a question coming in from Facebook. Let's see. If a student has great grades, very positive SAT scores, and a part-time job? Should the student let potential schools know that she worked during high school? Also, some sports team involvement, but wondering if work ethic is considered by admissions professionals. Absolutely, Amy. Work, whether that work is done, for frankly, for the student's own benefit, some students actually work to help their family income. I should say, I'm going to extend that out. Some students are actually watching younger brothers and sisters so that their parents can be out at work. That should also be mentioned. And they can do that. Students can do that in a couple of different ways on the Common App. They can either put it in their activities list as one of their activities, work or, watching siblings, or they can actually write one of their supplemental essays on it. And, or if they think it's a big enough part of their life, they could write their whole personal statement on that activity. So work is absolutely a valid and very good thing that that admissions professionals look at, especially I think because among Gen Z, work is often a lot less frequent than among Gen Xers or baby boomers. I'm not sure how old everybody is on the call, but I'm thinking maybe generally Gen X. Yes, for sure, mention that. Other questions? Well, in the interest of time, it's 1:02, and I know a couple of people have already had to drop off the call. I want to thank Igor for partnering with me. Thank all of you for coming and watching on Facebook, if that's how you're doing this. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope to see you at another webinar soon. Igor, would you like to say anything? Okay, great. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.